All right, let's talk about one of the trickiest, but also one of the most common areas in medical coding, the endocrine system. We're going to go on a little quest today to figure out how to accurately code for these diseases that affect the body's delicate hormonal balance. It's a real challenge, but we're going to break it down. It really all boils down to this one big question, right? How do you take this incredibly detailed patient story, all the nuances of their metabolism, their history, and distill it all down into a single universal code? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
So where do we start? Well, our map for this whole quest is Chapter 4 of the ICD-10-CM codebook. It's our guide, and what it really shows us is how everything in the body is connected. The endocrine system touches everything, and this chapter gives us the tools we need to tell that interconnected story, starting with the biggest one of all.
And that, of course, is diabetes mellitus. If you're a coder, you see this condition all the time. It's probably the most common one in this chapter, and it has its own very specific set of rules and, complexities. So what exactly is it we're coding?
So in its very core, this is the official definition. And you'll notice it's not just about sugar. It's a much deeper problem with how the body processes all its main fuel sources. This impairment is really the root cause of all the complications we're about to get into. This right here is the first, most critical distinction you have to make. Think of it like this. With type 1, the body's insulin factory is just broken. It's not producing insulin. But with type 2, the factory is working, maybe even overtime, but the body just can't use the insulin properly. Getting this right is step 1 of our coding journey. Okay, so these are your starting blocks. Think of them as the main highways. Every single diabetes diagnosis is going to start with one of these category codes. From here, we'll get more specific and add more detail. But you always have to start by identifying the fundamental type or cause. Now, this is a huge one, a crucial rule every coder needs burned into their memory. What do you do when the doctor's chart just says diabetes? Well, the guidelines are crystal clear. If it's not specified, you default to type 2. That means you're going to use a code from that E11 category. That's a default you absolutely have to remember. All right, so we've got the basics down, but let's be real. Diabetes rarely travels alone, right? The next step, and this is where it gets more complex, is coding for all the related health problems. And this is where the whole idea of causal links becomes incredibly important. This right here is the golden rule of diabetes coding. ICD-10-CM has this special, built-in assumption. It basically says, hey, if a patient has diabetes and they also have certain other conditions, we're going to assume the two are connected. The system presumes that causal relationship for you. And here's how that plays out in the real world. Because of this with guideline, if you see diabetes and neuropathy listed in the same chart, you automatically code for diabetic neuropathy. You don't have to wait for the doctor to spell it out and write neuropathy due to diabetes. The coding system makes that connection for you. It's a huge time saver. So let's see how this all comes together to paint a really complete picture. First, you identify the base condition, say type 1 diabetes. Then you spot the complication, chronic kidney disease. The system gives you a great combination code, E1022, that links them together, but you don't stop there. You add a second code, N18.4, to specify the exact stage of that kidney disease. Now you've told a precise, powerful story. But, and this is a big but, here's the catch. This awesome automatic assumption doesn't apply to everything. For some major conditions, like coronary artery disease, that link is not presumed. In those cases, you need the physician to explicitly document the connection, something like coronary artery disease due to diabetes, before you can make that link in your codes. Now, let's switch gears a little. Chapter 4 isn't just the diabetes chapter. It also covers other really critical metabolic issues, and a huge one is obesity. These are some of the real workhorse codes for obesity, and you can see how specific you can get. Everything from a general overweight code to morbid obesity that's causing serious breathing problems. Capturing this level of detail is so important for understanding a patient's full health picture and their risks. So what about BMI? Body Mass Index. It's a key number, but listen up. Here's the rule. You can only add a secondary code for a patient's BMI if the physician has specifically documented that it's clinically significant. In other words, it has to be relevant to the diagnosis or care. You can't just pull it from the nurse's notes and code it. And when you do get the green light to code BMI, this is the breakdown you'll use from the CDC. So, for example, a patient with a BMI of 39 would fall into Class 2.
This kind of detail is incredibly valuable for tracking patient outcomes and public health trends.
All right, we've gone over the rules of the road. Now it's time to put all that knowledge to the test. Let's do a little quick-fire coding challenge. You ready?
First one up. You've got a patient with type 2 diabetes who is experiencing ketoacidosis. That's a really serious complication. How are you going to code that? And the answer is E11.10. Let's break it down. The E11 tells us it's type 2 diabetes. The 0.1 specifies ketoacidosis. And that last 0 tells us it's without a coma, since that wasn't mentioned. See? Perfect. Okay, next one's a little trickier. The documentation says chronic kidney disease, stage 4, due to type 1 diabetes. What are the codes for this? And there you have it. It's a 2-code answer just like we practiced. First, you have E10.22, that great combination code for type 1 diabetes with chronic kidney disease. Then you add N18.4 to get that crucial detail about it being stage 4. Beautiful. All right, last one. A patient has a diagnosis of morbid obesity, and the physician has noted their BMI of 39 is clinically significant. What's the code combination? That's right, it's another 2-code combo. You start with E66.01 for the morbidity itself. Then you add that secondary code, Z68.39, to specify that the adult's BMI is between 39.0 and 39.9. Together, they tell the whole story. You know, it's so important to remember that every single code we assign is more than just a number for billing. It's a piece of data. It tells a part of a patient's story. And when you combine it with millions of others, it helps us all understand disease on a global scale. It's a pretty vital contribution. So thanks for joining me on this little coding quest.